Whether you're designing for desktop or mobile, you're going to have these lists and cards that are going to create these activity feeds or home feeds or media feeds, and they're always going to link to some type of detail screen. Just about every single app that you can possibly imagine has some type of list view or card view, and it links to a detail screen. Think about tweets in the timeline linking to a detail view of that particular tweet, and you can see all the retweets, the favorites, the comments, the replies. Think about Facebook posts. You can see the original post with maybe a truncated description. You tap, you go to the next screen, and you see the full thing along with all the comments and more detail. There's always going to be some type of truncated or snapshot view of a list, and it's going to link to that detail view. And so you can pretty much guarantee that almost every app or interface that you design is going to have some type of concept between list overview and linking to that detail view. So let's take a look at a couple of examples of how that transitions between certain apps and some of the techniques that you can keep in mind while you're designing those detail screens. So you can see here on the Spotify example, we have a simple list view. And if you tap Discover Weekly here, it's just going to do your standard slide transition here to the Discover Weekly detail view. And then right here, there you go. We're bringing in the large image, bringing in a little bit more information that wasn't already there. Same thing here on the iOS Mail app. You have your list view. It's separated differently than the Spotify stuff, but same basic concept. It's just a matter of how much information is valuable in this list view when I'm checking my email versus how much of that summary information is valuable when I'm just checking out a new playlist. So in this example, we get that extra bit of information in that list because it's a little bit more valuable, so we can see what that email is. But again, it's the same left to right transition, and you can go back and forth. There's no custom animation, but it's sweet and simple and to the point and gets that animation, that interaction point across. Okay, here we have the CalcBot example. And remember, the list up here is showing what's happened inside of all these expressions that have been used. So they're using a little bit of space up here for a list. And let's watch what happens when we interact with this list and how it can affect the detail view. This is definitely more in the custom ballpark. You scroll up here, you can see your list. And if we tap on one of these expressions, we can use it in the detail view. So there's no sliding left to right. We're just choosing whether or not we want to use that expression or the result. And the list is actually modifying the detail view. So it's not transitioning from left to right. We have a list and we have a static area that can be kind of interacted with and gone in between, but that list is controlling the information on that screen. So there's no animation, there's no left to right slide. It's useful because it's being used as a complete utility. You just tap it and it changes that information below. So this is kind of a unique case, but it's important to remember that when we're designing and laying out all these lists and details, that you can have an incredible amount of interactivity, and you can tap things on a screen that change another part of the screen. And as long as it's not designed in a way that's completely separated, you can make some really cool interactions with some lists and detail views. All right, here we're going to take a look at the Facebook group page. Again, remember, this is kind of that hybrid card system where we have full width cards that are separated by this kind of padding on top and bottom of all the different cards. And they're doing that to maximize that screen real estate, but also make it feel interactive. So we can scroll through and we can tap on this full post to get to that detail screen. And you can see that whenever I tap there, there's a lot of the same information, but then we're bringing in bigger versions of these actions. We're bringing in a little bit more of the analytics. We're bringing in the ability to write a comment here. If we go back, some of that same information is here. I can still like and I can tap comment. A lot of that is still there, but they're making space on this detail screen to just have an expanded version of that. And there's space here to show additional comments, to show additional likes, and just, it's kind of containing more information that's not necessarily important to be displayed on that main list view. And then one of my personal favorites on this iOS App Store, they just have these really fun, big tiles, and it just it almost kind of begs you to tap into it. There are these big floating cards and you tap on it and they just grow into place. And it has this really fun little animation. There's lots, notice the way that X changes color when you scroll through the larger versions. Just a lot of very, very subtle and simple interactivity, but it just makes for a really fun kind of fluid experience. It can be overkill to use this type of animation on different types of apps, so you have to be mindful of what you're designing for. This one is much more of an exploratory, hot new app of the day, and I'm just kind of exploring and I'm trying to find things. But if you go to the search tab in this iOS App Store, it's not going to have a bunch of crazy animations. It just has a very clear, direct interface that lets you get what you want. And then it's going to use a list view of those results because you don't need a big card interactive interface when you're specifically hunting and searching for something. So in moments like this, where there's more exploration and you're just kind of looking around, you have a lot more freedom to work with some of these fun little growing and closing animations like this. Okay, now I want to play you a very quick video that I made a few years back for InVision when they were promoting Studio and we were recording these kind of time-lapse time run. So I'm going to play that for you and then we're going to dive into the file. Okay, so if we dig into this file, you can see right away that I've got this dark tile and this detail view. And then I have this lighter tile down here and then the same detail view. So just kind of playing with that. Night run is a dark mode screen and then like a day run is a day mode screen. And so I'm using cards here, but they're still linking to a detail view. And this is a conceptual app, so there's not a lot of like rigid, strict requirements about scanning a bunch of lists or anything. But I personally just kind of thought it would be a fun way to experiment with animation going in and out of these screens. So if you look at how this is set up, I've got title and time left aligned over here, but then title and time is center aligned right here, but it's the same size. San Francisco 17, San Francisco 11. So kind of a nice juxtaposition between a large title and a smaller font. And then I'm using 12 points here. I probably should have used 12 there in retrospect. I'm not sure if it makes a big difference to have that 11 and 12. So that might have been an oversight on my part. Then I'm using size 100 and then size 30 here because I just wanted to have a really cool, fun use of this typography. And this one, I'm making it even larger. So 166 point. I'm also bringing in average heart rate, calories burned. Now I probably could have fit that information on this screen, but I didn't think it was that relevant. Most of the time when I personally am looking for a run, I just want to know like how long of a run was it? What was my pace? And then if I want more details and I want to look at all the splits, then I'll just go into that detail view. And then I've got a little toggle here where you can go back and forth. If I just pull up this, you kind of watch how this is kind of going in and out again. So just going from that card view to that detail view, you can see kind of like the subtle interactions that are happening. And I've got an entire video series on how I put together all these prototype details. So if you check out Switch to Studio, you can find this specific content. And I'll cover a lot more about prototyping and how to work these animations in the prototyping section of Tactics. But for now, I just really want to point out that there's the ability to create these custom interactions, and you don't always have to go from list and card view just swiping over to the right. A lot of times that's perfectly fine to go into the detail view like that, but when you have an opportunity to create some kind of fun interaction or fun animation for something like this, it could be worth a shot to see if it's something that could work for your project. Now, again, this is completely conceptual, and I would never design something and animate something like this without first at least having a conversation with a developer or with the team if it was even feasible or a viable option to create something like this. So I wouldn't recommend just designing this and saying, here's what we want to do. I think it's important to get buy-in from a developer or a stakeholder about the amount of time that it would take, because, creating this versus just having a purely swipe left and right interaction, and that could be the difference of 2 to 4 weeks of time just coding animations and testing everything. If you're paying a team of developers for 4 weeks versus a day, then that's a lot of money spent that could have been saved. So that factors in a lot when it comes to deciding whether or not you're going to do a detail view like this or not. So for homework, I want you to design a detail screen for your fictitious app. And ideally, it would be using one of the lists or the card view from your homework from the last lesson. So I want you to create an associated detail screen with that list view that reveals more information. It might be more content, more actions, something that warrants a detail view. And I want you to consciously choose and think about what type of interaction should happen between the screens. It'll be tempting to think of some fancy custom thing, kind of like this running concept design that I made, but that might not be what works best for your app. It might not be the best thing to explore. Sometimes a simple standard kind of sliding left or right will just do the trick. Sometimes it might need to trigger a modal because it's a new view, and it might need to come from the bottom and you cancel to get out of it. But it really just depends on the type of app that you're designing. So you don't need to prototype this or animate this unless you want to just dive into some of those ideas. Because again, I'll be covering a little more animation and prototyping in another lesson. But for now, I really want you to focus on the design of that detail screen and think about what'll happen in between those two screens. So emphasize certain details over the other on the detail screen. Maybe the title gets really large, or maybe the title needs to go small in the top. Maybe some of that content gets really large. Maybe the thumbnail that you were using on the previous screen goes big, full width. Maybe it goes behind the status bar. You decide what looks really good for your detail screen. Also keep in mind what happens when you scroll through the detail screen. Take a look at this Spotify example. When you scroll through the Discover Weekly detail view, the image scales down to the back, and then the title slowly fades in from the bottom to the top. Then the play button gets stuck and it becomes this new header. So there's a lot of tiny little interactions, tiny little details that make this detail view be quite unique. So think about what you can do on your designs to kind of add a little bit of extra fun and interactivity to your detail screen. So best of luck on the homework, and I can't wait to see what you come up with.